And now it's time to analyze the operational situation on the Lyman front. The enemy is becoming more ferocious here as well. In the Lyman direction, the aggressor attacked 23 times, attempting to advance in the areas of the settlements of Cherneshchina, Novy Mir, Prakivka, Karpova, Korovi Yar, Drobyshev, Empolivka, Terny, Zarekhnaya, Novoselivka, and towards Lyman, Novoselivka, and Stavki. In response to Putin's stories about the Burevestnik and Poseidon, the US unveiled a new nuclear stealth missile. What is this technological marvel, and against whom could this missile be used? We'll tell you more in a moment.
Putin has gone too far, and the US has responded to the dictator's wonder weapons.
Honestly, I doubt I can really add anything new here at this point to the discussion.
That's for sure. You've already added everything you could. First, Putin announced the completion of decisive tests of the intercontinental cruise missile with a nuclear engine, the Burevestnik, which, according to him, has no analogues in the world. With
regard to range, the Burevestnik has reportedly surpassed all known missile systems in the world.
After that, he reported the successful launch of the nuclear torpedo Poseidon from a submarine.
These are underwater unmanned devices. The unmanned underwater device Poseidon is also equipped with a sophisticated nuclear power unit. For the very first time, we successfully managed not only to launch it from the carrier submarine by utilizing the starting engine, but also to activate the nuclear power unit.
But all the threats turned out to be in vain, and now Putin should think carefully. What tall tales will he tell next time? After all, Washington has now given a clear response, showing the world its latest nuclear weapon. On October 29th, a bomber was spotted over California with an unusual object under its wing. It was the latest nuclear missile developed as part of a secret program to modernize the US nuclear arsenal. Defense News called it a leap into a new era of strategic deterrence, noting that the missile is smaller, stealthier, and far more deadly than its predecessors. It is built using stealth technology, which allows it to evade detection by enemy radars. The public appearance of the missile under the wing of a B-52 bomber was its first demonstration in actual flight. And this was an official test flight, not a training exercise. With a range of over 2,400 kilometers, the new missile allows American bombers to strike from beyond the reach of even the most advanced air defense systems. Let us recall that at the end of October, US President Donald Trump ordered the Pentagon to immediately begin testing nuclear weapons after Putin had been flaunting the capabilities of the Burevestnik in front of everyone. Well, let's see what the Russian dictator will boast about next.
And now let's move to the Slavansk direction of the front. The Russian world continues here as well, to destroy, kill, and maim. In the Slavansk direction, Ukrainian soldiers repelled 8 enemy attacks over the past day. The occupiers' units tried to advance in the areas of the settlements of Yampol, Serebryanka, Fedorovka, Seversk, Viemka, and Zvanovka. The Ukrainian armed forces managed to destroy key components of the aggressor country's air defense in Novorossiysk. Right now, we will tell you about this and other most effective airstrikes against Russia's military and fuel infrastructure, and how these successful attacks are undermining the combat capability of Putin's army.
First of all, they destroyed at least 4, and secondly, they also eliminated 2 radars. And that's not counting the fact that a dozen such systems may have been damaged.
New details, new conclusions. It turns out that the strike on Novorossisk on the night of November 14th not only marked the collapse of Russian oil supplies, but also became the most powerful blow to Russia's air defense systems during the entire war.
Ukraine carried out one of the most devastating strikes against Russian air defenses. They destroyed 4 S-400 launchers at once, as well as 2 radar stations from this battery.
Ukrainian media reported this yesterday, citing sources in the Security Service of Ukraine, SBU. It became known that 4 S-400 Triumph launchers were completely destroyed. They were located on the territory of the military unit of the Kuban Red Banner Regiment. In total, there were 12 such launchers at the site. The security service believes that some of the others were also partially hit. As a result, the entire division has been put out of action.
If anything at all is overlooked or not properly addressed in this regard, then at the critical moment when these launchers are required to operate and function as intended, an emergency situation could very easily occur, which could once again lead to the catastrophic detonation or explosion of the launcher itself, or alternatively, it could cause the missile to veer off course and miss its intended target. In short, to summarize, there could be a wide variety of different and potentially severe consequences in this particular case if some seemingly minor or insignificant issue is overlooked or not given the necessary attention. So basically, at this point in time, the entire base with all its equipment and personnel can essentially be written off as lost.
At the same time, 2 expensive radars from these long-range air threat detection systems were destroyed, as well as the targeting radar, which was actually guiding those very S-400. But even multi-million-dollar losses aren't the main issue here. What's more important is that right now, the Russians simply have nothing to replace the lost equipment with.
Well, while it's still somehow possible to replace the launchers, it's extremely difficult to replace the radars, as you know. Because each radar is a high-tech instrument, and under sanctions, it's very hard, time-consuming, and expensive to assemble one. Here, there are 2 radars at once, and both they were operating as part of a specific battery. In other words, the battery has fallen apart. Now it needs to find a new radar, meaning eyes, without which air defense is useless.
It's still unclear what exactly our defense forces used to strike Novorossiysk. Most likely it was the SBU operating drones. However, several Ukrainian special services were involved in the attack at once. So analysts agree that the strike was a combined one.
You just need to make a wish at night. Maybe that was the wish for Novorossiysk. You see, wishes have a way of coming true. So that's the kind of menu the defense forces offer. It's always nice. But seriously, if we're talking about the systematic nature of such strikes, it's so systematic that they hit 2 or 3 times.
It should also be noted that the destruction of military equipment and port infrastructure in Novorossiysk is in fact just the crowning achievement. All of these operations were meticulously and very carefully prepared, and along the way destroyed quite a few significant targets.
For our drone operators to reach Novorossisk is quite a feat. It's a very high-value target.
At the same time, the same sources in the SBU add that for now, an entire air defense division in Novorossisk has been put out of action, leaving a huge gap in Russian defenses, one that Ukrainian drones and missiles will undoubtedly take advantage of. And
Now it's time to analyze the situation on the Hulyapol front line. The bloody rampage of the enemy army continues here as well. On the Hulyapol front, the aggressors attacked our defenders' positions 14 times near the settlements of Dobropole, Ravnopol, Zeleny High, Vesele, Bilohirya, Vysoke, Ternovate, and in the direction of Zatishia. Weapons from the United Kingdom are on their way to Ukraine. London remains the main partner, and because the organization has maintained a weak position on this issue, it has often found itself unable to assert its views or influence the direction of important discussions, which has limited its overall impact.
On the front, Russia is attacking critically important facilities in Ukraine. Civilian facilities. Destruction and casualties among the population. Over the past day, Russian troops have attacked energy facilities in several regions of Ukraine. Restoration work continues at the sites of impact. A very important aspect in this matter is the energy assistance from the United Kingdom. The country, understanding the situation, has allocated more than 14 million euros.
Putin is trying to plunge Ukraine into darkness and cold as winter approaches. These vile strikes are not only an attack on Ukraine's security, but also a threat to the economic stability and growth of the United Kingdom.
London has announced the allocation of additional funds for carrying out vital repair work in Ukraine's energy sector to help Ukrainians this winter.
Russia has made Ukraine's civilian energy infrastructure a target in this war. Now, as we enter the cold winter, they are intensifying their brutal attacks on energy and heating networks while Putin tries to intimidate the Ukrainian people. However, Ukraine continues to demonstrate exceptional resilience despite all the hardships.
Funding for restoration will ensure uninterrupted lighting and heating in the homes of Ukrainians, as well as in hospitals and schools.
We are grateful to the United Kingdom and Prime Minister Keir Starmer for extending humanitarian and energy support to Ukraine and for the announced energy assistance package. At a time when Russia is increasing the number of attacks on civilians and critical infrastructure, such solidarity is extremely important.
London continues to put pressure on Russia through sanctions as well. It has announced new restrictions for the Kremlin, which will be gradually implemented throughout 2026. This is a continuation of sanctions against oil giants, Putin's associates, Rosneft and Lukoil.
These strikes pose a threat not only to Ukraine's security, but also to the economic stability of the United Kingdom itself. Ukraine's security is our security. Together with our G7 partners, we stand side by side, supporting Ukraine and overcoming all challenges. Yes.
From the very first days of the full-scale war, the United Kingdom became one of Ukraine's key strategic partners, not only supplying weapons, but also establishing effective financial and institutional support mechanisms.
The United Kingdom will continue to resolutely enforce our financial sanctions as part of our broader response to Russia's barbaric invasion of Ukraine.
The United Kingdom has established an important system of military assistance to Ukraine, financing innovative funds, international partnerships, credit mechanisms, and support for the Ukrainian defense industry.
It is Russia, not Ukraine, that must pay for Putin's illegal war. The use of Russian assets to strengthen Ukraine's air defense, our right to Ukraine's security, is critically important to us.
The UK Ministry of Defence has signed contracts with companies for the maintenance of armoured vehicles, the production of artillery shells, and the repair of transferred weapons. These contracts provide for the deployment of repair facilities on Ukrainian territory. It was the United Kingdom that became one of the first countries to supply Ukraine with high-precision missile weaponry. A real breakthrough was the decision to provide long-range Storm Shadow missiles. In 2023, the British government announced the transfer of cruise missiles capable of striking targets at distances of more than 250 kilometers. Storm Shadow became the first long-range missiles received by Ukraine, and were immediately used to strike strategic targets in the occupied territories. This month, the armed forces of Ukraine received a new batch of Storm Shadow missiles. The United Kingdom provided the Ukrainian armed forces with protective gear, vehicles, communications equipment, demining support, as well as assistance with equipment maintenance and digital transformation. Britain became the first country to announce plans to supply Ukraine with main battle tanks. Compared
to the T-80, the stabilization and optics here are much better. Aiming is done using buttons on a panel similar to a joystick. The turret rotates 360 degrees in 9 seconds. The Challenger 2 maneuvers, making it difficult for enemy anti-tank guided missiles to aim. At the same time, the tank itself is very accurate. As part
of the Challenger 2 tank deliveries, shells for them were also received. The British tanks were supplemented with specialized repair and recovery vehicles, which made it possible to ensure their technical autonomy in use. In 2025, an agreement on a century-long partnership was signed between Ukraine and Britain. This comprehensive document establishes long-term cooperation between the two countries in the fields of defense, economy, energy, justice, science, culture, education, healthcare, and social policy. Britain's assistance is long-term, so we can always count on the support of a reliable partner. For now.
That's all, but very soon on the Front News program, there will be new, unique reports from our journalists from the hottest spots of the war, gathered so that you know the truth. This was Volodymyr Tymoshenko with you. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones. Watch right now on the Front News Project. Hellish battles in Pokrovsk, exclusive footage from Kupansk. Ukrainian armed forces are clearing the city of Russians. You have to see this. French Rafale fighter jets will strike Moscow, a historic document signed by France. And also, the southern Russian Federation is on fire again, and this is just the beginning. Fiery, intense, and blazing footage from the front lines. Watch right now. Greetings, this is Volodymyr Tymoshenko with you, and we're starting right away with the main topic. Kupansk, Kharkiv region is at the epicenter of battles between Ukrainian defenders and Russian occupiers. The Russians have launched an entire information operation in the Kupansk area, trying to create the illusion of control over the city. In reality, the elimination of Russian forces in the northern part of Kupansk continues. What is happening right now in the Kharkiv region? More in our exclusive report.
By November 15th, that is the deadline Russian dictator Putin has set for the capture of Kupiansk. However, the Russian army has once again missed its own deadlines and failed to take control of the city. This was stated by the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. Currently, Ukrainian units are holding key heights and settlements both in Kupiansk and around the city.
At the moment, the situation in Kupiansk has been largely stabilized.
There, Ukrainian forces continue an active operation to destroy Russian units in the northern part of the city, where the enemy has been cut off from its main supply routes.
I wouldn't say it's very easy, but considering that they are cut off from their main supplies and cannot receive effective reinforcements right now, they are currently in a much worse situation than Ukrainian defenders were even at their lowest point.
To strengthen the defense in the Kupiansk direction, operational reserves have been redeployed, including Special Operations Forces units with experience in urban combat.
Additionally, it has been possible to significantly stabilize the situation and the Kupiansk hub direction. This is a key railway station that the occupiers are trying to break through to. They are in dire need of control over this particular logistical component of Ukraine's defense forces in order to use the short logistics route to create a strike group in this direction, which would aim to advance further towards Sloviansk-Kramatorsk along the Oskil River.
And of course, what would it be without Russian fakes? Another masterpiece from the Kremlin. According to the Joint Forces grouping, the occupiers have been ordered to film staged videos, waving the tricolor flag in places where, in reality, there are only small groups of infantry. They even started including flags in supply packages that drones dropped to Russian units in the city. At least one such operation has already taken place. But in reality, this stunt played into the hands of the defenders of Naukorin. It became much easier for operators to detect and destroy the enemy.
A few years ago, the Russians received an order. We started dropping flags to them and they began waving those flags. They want to show that they're in a certain place, to prove something, and to show that Putin and the general staff weren't lying. Nevertheless, these flags clearly highlight the positions they aren't missing. So they're trading the real situation of the Russians in the penning districts of the ministry for a fictitious one. This is generally typical of Russian propaganda, but still.
At the same time, the occupiers have suddenly become much more active in the area of Mylov, in the Kharkiv region. There, the enemy wants to create a wide so-called buffer zone from Milove to Kupiansk and further to Vovchansk.
In other words, the occupiers plan to expand their area of presence in order to create a precedent for a so-called territorial exchange. That is, they will propose Kupiansk, the Kupiansk districts, and Vovchansk in exchange for the withdrawal of Ukrainian units from the controlled areas of Donetsk region.
In Kupiansk, the enemy continues to use scorched earth tactics. This involves the use of army frontline aviation, strikes with bombs on residential neighborhoods of the city, plus the use of the heavy flamethrower system Soln-Sepyok.
This is a thermobaric weapon which is prohibited for use in urban areas due to its indiscriminate effects. And
while the occupying army searches for ways to capture Kupiansk, their massive assaults, rotations, and constant pressure are not yielding the desired results. The majority of the city remains firmly under the control of Ukraine's defense forces, while the Russians lose dozens of their soldiers every day.
Breaking news from Paris. Zelensky and Macron have signed a declaration on defense cooperation. What will this mean in practice? Ukraine may, in particular, acquire 100 Rafale F-4 aircraft, SAMT air defense systems, radars for air defense systems, air-to-air missiles, as well as aerial bombs. Naturally, the Kremlin is very tense about this. Here are the details.
Kyiv is becoming a global center for combat drone production. Currently, Ukraine produces up to 4 million combat UAVs annually. Meanwhile, the US produces less than 100,000 combat drones per year. And 4 million is not the limit of the Ukrainian defense industry's capabilities. With sufficient funding, this number could increase several times over. This was written on his page by Ukraine's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Andriy Sybiha.
The new arms race is not about nuclear weapons, but about millions of cheap drones. Whoever can ramp up production faster will secure peace. With sufficient funding, we can produce up to 20 million drones next year. Andriy Sybiha, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine.
Right now, Ukraine is racing against time, both in terms of resources and technology, and the issue of increasing UAV production is a matter of survival. Ukrainian companies are not only meeting the needs of the defense forces, but are also trying to enter international markets. Unique technologies tested in real combat conditions are attracting serious interest from partners. Some Ukrainian companies have already expanded their production not only within Ukraine, but also beyond its borders.
Ukrainian companies in Europe? Skaton has opened a facility in Slovakia and attracted over 10 million euros in investment. Flywell is preparing joint production with Finland. Firepoint has received support from Denmark for the development of a missile tank, fuel for the Flamingo cruise systems.
The Ukrainian company Tessir is setting up a production line in Finland. Its founder, Oleksandr Hrachov, explained in an interview with Bloomberg that he is pursuing two goals in Finland. First, to ensure reliable supply to the front in Ukraine by moving part of the production capacity outside the combat zone. And second, to attract Western funding to expand production.
The war and the need to finance, develop and manufacture weapons to fight a wealthier and larger adversary have pushed Ukrainian manufacturers to exchange technologies with their European allies. Krakow is concerned that Europe is not learning quickly enough from Ukraine's experience. In the time it took him to set up a production line in Finland, his drones in Ukraine had already gone through 3 generations.
It's not just about drone production abroad, but also the support of our European partners is a key to victory in the war against Russia. Without exaggeration, a historic agreement was signed by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and French President Emmanuel Macron. I want to emphasize the importance of this agreement. This is a strategic agreement that will be in effect for 10 years starting next year. We understand all the fundamentals of this agreement: political, financial, industrial. This is a historic agreement. It is very valuable that France is taking such a step to achieve real guaranteed security in Europe. Under the terms of the agreement, Ukraine will acquire 100 Rafale F-4 aircraft from France by 2035 for Ukraine's combat aviation. SAMPAD-T air defense systems, radars for them, air-to-air missiles and aerial bombs. Also, as early as this year, joint projects between the defense industries of the two countries will begin. This involves joint production of interceptor drones and work on developing critical technologies for Ukrainian UAVs. Building up Ukraine's own air defense and carrying out systematic deep strikes on Russian infrastructure are the keys to a successful end to the war for Ukraine.
And now, let's move to the Alexandrovsk direction of the front. The situation here, as usual, is extremely tense. In the Alexandrovsk direction, the defense forces repelled 21 attacks near the settlements of Zeleny Gai and Yalta, Andreevka, Klevtsevo, Alexandrogorod, Voskresenko, Stepovoy, Sosnovka, Verbovoy, Alexeyevka, Pavlovka, Privolnoye, Krasnogorskoye, and Zlagoda. The horrific missile and drone strike on Kiev did not go unanswered. To be specific, the Novorossisk oil export terminal and the Saratov oil refinery were set on fire. And while Russian inhumans kill peaceful Ukrainians, the armed forces of Ukraine are systematically destroying the oil infrastructure of the aggressor country. Here's how it happens.
From the promise to take Kiev in 3 days to total blackouts and the introduction of a state of emergency now within Russia itself.
We're feeling bored, it's also stagnant and dull, and honestly, we really want some excitement and action in our lives.
Thanks to bunker dwellers and Ukrainian drones in some regions of the Russian Federation, things are, as Putin would say, really heating up. For example, last night in the Krasnodar region, the distinctive sounds of incoming strikes, sirens, alerts, and explosions were heard in Henichesk, Anapa, and Novorossiysk. As a result, in Novorossiysk alone, a nighttime attack damaged an oil depot at the Sheskaris transshipment complex, one of Russia's largest oil terminals, through which a significant portion of Putin's oil exports pass. Local officials also reported that part of the coastal facilities was destroyed. In addition, debris from already downed drones damaged a storage tank and the pier of Chernomorsky Transneft. The latter effectively led to a halt in the pumping of black gold to the port of Novorossisk. A state of emergency was declared in the city itself. It later turned out that the state of emergency in the city was not introduced for the safety of citizens, but to conceal the consequences of the strikes. After all, it wasn't just the Russian oil industry that was hit. The local military unit was also destroyed. An air defense unit was stationed on its grounds. At least one S-400 system and an ammunition depot were there. One eyewitness video captured the moment the Russian ammunition depot was struck.
This was the first time something like this happened.
Afterburner. We're not here to debate.
After the footage was published, Russian Z military bloggers were quick to point out that a Ukrainian drone couldn't have reached the target that fast. But a missile could have. The Kremlin's worst fears were soon confirmed by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
Last night, our soldiers successfully used long-range Neptunes against specific targets on Russian territory. This is our entirely justified response to the ongoing Russian terror. Ukrainian missiles are now delivering more tangible and precise results almost every month. And
even though Zelensky did not specify in his address which exact targets the Ukrainian armed forces struck, there is little doubt left among experts.
Refer to official sources. Based on official sources that publish videos and generally provide officially verified information, there is reason to believe that this type of Ukrainian weaponry is starting to appear in greater numbers and is being used more extensively against the Russian Federation. As a result,
Ukrainian attacks are becoming much more large-scale time after time. So besides Novorossisk, last night the Ukrainian armed forces once again targeted the Saratov oil refinery. A week earlier, Ukrainian drones had already struck the oil refinery. At that time, the facility had to be temporarily shut down. Now, hopefully, the refinery will be permanently closed for good.
There are still far too many military facilities on the territory of the Russian Federation that need to be taken out. And the lights in Moscow will go out almost automatically once certain facilities in the Russian Federation are shut down. We won't even have to try that hard for the Ilyich's light bulb to go out in Russia. It will definitely happen. It is inevitable.
Meanwhile, the Russian Eagle is plunging into complete darkness.
Is it still flying? Yeah, it's still flying. I swear, you're scary. It's fine. Is this already the third one? Yeah. Here comes another one. Basically, they're launching rockets from our airstrip. There it is.
The local residents still can't recover from the recent raid by Ukrainian drones.
I don't know if it was the right thing to do, going outside, but basically, everything out there is on fire. And
all this despite the fact that the Ukrainian armed forces, unlike the Russian army, strike exclusively at legitimate targets, military facilities of the Kremlin. As for imagining what will happen when Ukrainian Flamingos and long-range Neptunes start actively joining the attacks, we'll be able to see that in the coming months. After all, according to experts, serial production of Ukraine's newest weapons has already begun. Which means, going forward, it will only get worse, at least for Russia's military-industrial complex and oil industry.
This is quite a diverse range, which makes it possible to strike and destroy targets en masse on the territory of the Russian Federation, even at significant distances from the borders or the front lines. This, in fact, is a rather serious and positive indicator that step by step, in a systematic way, we are taking out key targets on Russian territory and destroying, among other things, military production.